Yiberek Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ha'er Adonai puna alecha v'hunecha, Yesa Adonai puna alecha v'yisim lecha shalom. When word reaches Teiman, a nation lying along the king's highway, an elite Elifa leaves and heads along the king's highway and the tribal routes with his servants. Further in the deserts of the Negev, Tzofar, one of the elites of Nawa, leaves and heads along the trade routes with his servants after hearing how his friend Iyov has suffered. As he travels north, there is another man traveling to Uz along the trading routes of the east after word of his companion's misfortunes has reached Shuach. This nation lies between Dion, Canatha, Abila, Gamla, and what will be Nawa, Syria and Bosra, Syria. Bildad, one of the elites of Uz, one of the elites of Shuach, heads to Uz along the trading routes with his servants. When they meet just inside the boundary of Uz, they come to agree to give him their sympathy and comfort. As they approach his house, they see a man that doesn't even look human. They may have asked who the person is and are informed that this miserable wretch is Iyov. They, in response, weep aloud, tear their coats, and throw dust over their heads toward heaven. As he has not given them a salutation in accordance to the grieving customs of Shikha, they do not speak. After 7 days and 7 nights of silence, Iyov cries a curse against his conception and his birth, which is to be erased from history. Furthermore, he demands those who practice sorcery to curse his birthday, in the same way that sailors curse Leviathan, and stating he wishes he was miscarried or stillborn. He closes his cries with, "I have no peace, no quiet, no rest, and anguish keeps coming." Eliphaz, being from Teiman, a center of wisdom and learning, is thought to be a wise man. He starts to speak, being the eldest of the friends and having the right to speak before the other two. He feels compelled out of love of a friend. However, he addresses that Iyov isn't practicing what he preaches by saying, "Isn't your fear of the Lord your assurance, and the integrity of your ways your hope?" Building on this thought, Eliphaz says that Iyov has to be guilty of some hidden sin, as according to him, no spiritually innocent person is punished, as he must be guilty of some innocent sin, he is to be punished. For foundation of this belief, he discloses a dream he had, at which a form stood before him, which he could not discern. In the dream, a voice talked about even angels have fallen into error and are punished. Any righteous person, according to Eliphaz, will tell him the same thing. As if his speech can't get worse, he states that Iyov's late sons died due to their father's foolishness and was punishment from him, and that man born into trouble deserves trouble. If he would turn from his sin and to the Lord, Job would be delivered from all this according to Eliphaz. Even though he used his own experience to try to persuade him, Job goes on to talk about how great his suffering is. He admits that his words were indeed rash, but due to his grief and his wounds from the Eternal One. It is by this point that Job wishes for death to consume him, as his strength fails him and common sense has left him. Furthermore, he says that his friend had no sympathy to his desperate speech. He then moves to cry out to the Eternal One. He cries out that his life is like a breath, very short in span of time and eternity. As he goes to sleep, he finds himself having vivid and horrific visions and nightmares. He ends up cursing his life and soul due to the unrest he has, as he has become a burden to himself. Soon he asks if he sinned in some way and why he doesn't pardon him from his transgression. Bildad the Shikha, in response to Job's rebuke of Eliphaz as a vehement but empty windbag. Though he heard his words, Bildad didn't understand why Job had spoken such. He states that he punished his sons for their sins, and that to escape further punishment, Job must repent. If he is righteous as he claims, he will increase abundantly. Though he is drawing on the older generations, he forgets that the ancient generations show that righteousness doesn't always correlate to being blessed. Expounding more of the perversity of the wicked man, Bildad says, like papyrus which needs water, punishment is not independent of sin. The life and the path of the wicked will wither away sooner than the life and path of the righteous. By now, Job's temper was rising. It brings the matter to a boiling point when Bildad says the Eternal One would not cast away the blameless. Little does he realize that he is exposing that he lacks a personal relationship with the Lord, living on the faith of his ancestors and people in his life. In his temper, Job speaks of knowing the facts that Bildad has stated, but questions how a man could be righteous before the Lord. There are two aspects to such of moral life. Being relatively righteous, as Noah or Abraham were, and legally righteous by faith alone. Furthermore, he questions how is it possible for man to get his approval when the Lord made everything in creation. Such a concept exposes the vast void he senses between himself and the throne. Even though he is guiltless, he knows that, as all humanity, he isn't sinless. Best being summed up as, even if I'm right, my own mouth will condemn me. If I'm innocent, it would pronounce me guilty. Continuing, he says that he feels the Lord is doing this at the expense of godly sufferers, which has put him into an acute spiritual crisis. As he speaks on such concepts, he feels his life is slowly slipping away as a condemned man in the court of law. As he contemplates the widening gap between him and the throne, he wishes there could be a mediator between him and the Eternal One to help bridge the gap. He then begins to divulge that what he would say to him. Though he is tired, Job asks the divine to condemn him, or to not condemn him, thinking that this could would be a way of showing himself to him, to bring him closer to the divine, to humble him, to develop his graces, or to test him. Even with everything that has twisted his views, he knows he is blameless. Yet he knows he is not sinless. In fact, he appealed to the Lord, knowing his mind by saying, "You know that I won't be condemned, yet no one can rescue me from your power." He, as his creation, which he intricately made, as if it was his intention to withhold forgiveness, and that he keeps doing these actions against him. And in fact, he feels as if a hunted prey of a savage lion. He questions why he was born at all. Should, though he knows he will go to the grave, where he cannot return from. As the sun beats upon these men, Bildad seems perturbed, as do his fellow accusers. Tzofar, the Nabati, says that Iyov is full of talk without substance and keeps beating around the bush, criticizing his doctrine and convictions. It is in perspective that Iyov needs to admit to the sins he has committed, which have incurred these punishments, saying, "Understand that the Lord is demanding of you less than your guilt deserves." He adds that no one can know his limits and depths are beyond measure, manifesting as transcendence. To Tzofar, the Lord's sovereignty is such that Iyov needs to accept the unprovoked punishments and that he will not turn away from the justice which is being poured out on him. As to add insult to injury, he calls his friend stupid. An empty man can gain understanding, even if he was born like a wild donkey. Continuing, he tells Iyov to set his heart right, put his iniquity at distance, purge his household of unrighteousness, and turn to the Lord to be fearless and assured, being at peace in mind and body. However, Iyov, he stands up for himself in the face of such legalized ridicule, perverted doctrine, and ill speech of his friend. He states that he isn't inferior to them, but an equal, that creation itself will teach about the Lord. However, he does state that the wicked prosper, yet that everyone and everything is in his hands. Furthermore, he adds, "Shouldn't the ear test words, just as the palate tastes food? Is wisdom only with aged men? Discernment only with long life?" Iyov goes on to talk about the Lord's wisdom, power, counsel, and understanding, yet his authority over humanity manifesting by exile, removing kings or dynasties, and lifts anyone to power, and over nature, flooding, and droughts. Furthermore, he says that though he's grateful to his friend's visitation, he wants to talk to the Lord and not hear their thoughts. He speaks with them of the Lord's majesty, while questioning the Lord what he did to deserve all this, and calling upon the Lord an unjust in allocating these punishments to him. Moving from this and deepening in his depression, Iyov contemplates the brevity of humanity, meditating on a man's days being fixed in advance and won't continue after death. As his depression envelops him more, who wishes to be hidden in the grave. Notice he doesn't want to be buried in a tomb, but in a grave like a poor man or nomad. In response to Iyov's words, Elifa states that he should speak on dependence of the Lord without knowledge of such. Nor should he cast all fear. He begins to criticize Iyov's prayer life and self-defense. He even goes as far as to claim that the divine doesn't even trust angelic beings, much less mankind, but saying the Lord doesn't trust even his holy ones. No, even the heavens are not innocent in his view. How much less one loathsome and corrupt a human being who drinks iniquity like water. It is at this point that he tells Iyov to listen to him as he divulges what he has seen. The wicked are tormented throughout their lives and are truly poor even though they fake their success. As an extension of this philosophy, he calls Iyov a hypocrite. Iyov speaks out against his friends' advice as conventional wisdom. He sees that their deep confidence in their own wisdom made them incapable of comforting him properly. When he expresses his thoughts and feelings, he is rebuked. Besides feeling trapped thusly, amidst his previous caption of the divine has changed, as now he has been confronted with questioning everything he knew about the Lord. Going deeper into contemplation, he asks nature not to erase his existence. Through his mental and spiritual struggle, he maintains that he has a heavenly witness which would permit vindication for him. By now, each of them is getting tired of hearing each other talk. Bildad now begins to get insult for insult and accuses Iyov of bold insolence before the divine. In common language, it would be worded as insolence against the divine in a similar way as Nimrod. As such, Bildad states that Iyov's tormentor is himself. Furthermore, it seemed that Iyov, from Bildad's perspective, wanted to change the cause and effect of life's moral law. In addition to this, it is his plan to implement in Iyov's mind that since he is wicked, he is being and must be punished in this life. In fact, his own life has entrapped him, as for his own feet plunge him into a net. He wanders into its meshes. A trap grabs him by the heel. A snare catches hold of him. A noose is hidden for him in the ground. Pitfalls lie in his path. He continues to insult his friend as he turns to Iyov's quotes against him and mocks his condition, saying that his sin is destroying his body and slowly killing him. To add insult on retaliation, to add insult on top of itself, he implies that no one, including descendants, will remember him or his suffering. In retaliation, Iyov complains that they are not sympathetic and are tormenting him. He continues to tell them that he is a blameless victim suffering an insult, suffering an unjust penalty from the divine, but rather the divine has struck him for an unknown reason. It seems that the molester of man's souls is speaking through his friends. Iyov is starting to hint at the fact there are forces at work that he doesn't understand. He questions and complains about the Lord's silence on his suffering. As he says, "He has stripped me of my glory and removed the crown from my head. He tears every part of me down. I am gone. He uproots my hope like a tree." Iyov, in his suffering, he found the men he used to call his brothers are now strangers and enemies. Not even his remaining servant regards him. He begins to divulge the symptoms of his conditions and repulsive side effects. He cries for them to comfort and not insult or condemn him. Thinking of the future, he wishes his story of suffering was to be written down. Even though he feels betrayed by the divine, he says, "But I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will rise on the dust." Embittered by the reproach he has felt by Iyov's case against him, Tzofar speaks with non-discerning dignity, being ashamed of Iyov's attitude. Furthermore, he holds that his judgment is infallible and full of understanding. He states that Iyov is guilty of his claims, disregarding his professions of piety, and disputes the resurrection of the body. He states that wickedness only pays for a time, and there is nothing good that comes of it. Being unable to escape their destiny of judgment, Tzofar thinks that Iyov's self-sufficiency has caused him such agony and him to be a wicked man getting what he deserves. This, as by length's end, resulted in Iyov feeling he has been ignored. He tells him he wanted sympathy, not accusations and condemnation. In detail, he states that the wicked have offspring who have offspring, while he lacks such blessings. Adding to this, he states that he allows the wicked to prosper, and at the end of life, all men, regardless of their age, life journey, and background, end up in Sheol, which means, in this context, the grave. In that moment, Iyov transgressed the throne by saying, "Look, I know what you are thinking and your plans to do me wrong." Going further, he states that their analyzation of his moral order isn't as simple as the tent of the wicked in the palace of the prince. Iyov knows that the wicked eventually face punishment, though he would prefer them to be punished sooner than later. Now states, "Why offer me such meaningless comfort? Of your answers only the perfidy remains." Elifa expounds on his views of man being nothing in the Lord's eyes, nor can he give the Lord anything. He tells him that he doesn't take pleasure in Iyov's imperfect righteousness, and it isn't beneficial that he is blameless. To Eliphaz, Iyov is no longer a God-fearing man and begins to expound upon the sin that incurred these punishments and asks him if he will continue living in sin. Furthermore, in his mind, he states that Iyov should be rejoicing in these punishments if he really is a devout and righteous man. The repentant man is at peace with the Lord. However, what Eliphaz says doesn't fit Iyov's case, as he is a very devout man. Eliphaz does actually state the truth that man needs to equate himself with and lift his face to the Lord. By doing this, he will have delight in him. Iyov wonders why the divine doesn't set times and seasons for punishments. He proceeds to give real-world examples of sin founded in greed and cruelty, as well as the afflictions suffered upon the poor and elderly that are committed by those who are not in communion with the divine. However, though he can understand why he is compassionate upon those in distress and or trouble, he can't understand why the wicked aren't seemingly punished as they deserve. He, like many will in coming generations, believes that the divine should judge the wicked the way they would. However, he wonders if the punishments of the wicked, if not given in this world, will be given in the world to come. Even within this, his assessment is more balanced than that of his friends, who all blame the Eternal one could say, for the world's problems. Bildad, frustrated beyond reasoning by the Iyov's alleged stubbornness, states that the Lord is far beyond magnitude and a master to host without number. With Iyov being human, there is no way for him to be righteous with the Lord. At the terminus of this discourse, Bildad declares that he, in his heart of hearts, believes Iyov is guilty, regardless of what he says.